Hello, everyone. Russ of Aquarimax Pets here. I have two special guests today. You can see Cam and Cole are both here with me from Spock's Sanctuary. Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you. Now, I just wanted to give you a chance to introduce yourselves. Just tell us a little bit about yourselves in general, and then why and how you got started with your exotic animal rescue.
All right.
Who would like to start?
Cam, do you want to get us started?
I sure can. So I'm Cam. I am currently studying animal ecology at Iowa State with minors in nutrition, culinary science, and entrepreneurship. Pretty mouthful. And I met Cole here at college. Do you want to take off on who
Yeah.
you are, what you do?
So I also went to Iowa State. My degree is kind of a weird one in the sense of this, but my day job is actually teaching. So I am a agriculture education teacher. So I teach about agriculture, but it's really sort of a weird type of a teacher, as you can probably tell. But when we teach about interacting with animals and those sort of things, rather than bring in a farm animal like a lot of kids would expect, they'll bring in like a tegu, and it'll be completely like a foreign thing to them, but it will get them to conceptualize the content a lot more effectively. When I was at Iowa State, I met Cam, and we actually both were part of the Iowa State juggling and unicycling club together, so we have that in common.
Wow.
I used to be a performer when I was in high school, um, but we both we started dating back then. Spoiler alert: we're engaged now, so that's kind of cool.
Congrats.
Planning on getting married this summer. If she'll keep me around, we'll see. Uh, but a couple years ago, we wanted to get a common pet together. Like just because we're not planning on having kids at this moment, subject to change. We'll see what happens, I guess. But we wanted to get a pet, sort of as like a thing that we're together on. And we went to a pet store, and we had sort of the standard pet store um, experience, I guess, when you're wanting to get a unique animal. And we saw a room full of fish and then three reptiles. And the reptiles were a leopard gecko, a crested gecko, and a chameleon. And if you know anything about reptiles, you'll know one of those is harder to take care of by a convenient amount than the other. um, we did not know that at the time. But we ended up adopting a chameleon who we named Spock because their hands are like that.
Oh,
So we thought it was a funny name. Little did we know well, we knew we would fall in love with him, but we didn't know that we would eventually name a rescue after him. And the reason for that is in the pet store, and this is a pretty common thing in most pet stores, um, he was kept in like a 10-gallon enclosure. And chameleons don't exactly thrive in a 10-gallon enclosure, so spoiler. But we brought him home and we were like, we should do it just like the pet store did. They obviously know what they're doing. We should do it just like them. We put substrate on the ground. We had a few sticks, but nothing crazy. We had a water bowl for him to drink out of. Little did we know at the time, um, chameleons need a lot more arboreal space. They need um, running water because they don't see standing water as something that they can drink out of. Um, and we realized that there's a lot of misinformation in the pet industry, and that's sort of when we knew we had to make a change, and that's when we founded Spock Sanctuary.
awesome.
Do you
So
have any?
basically, you were kind of that you found that there was a void that needed to be filled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything I missed in that story, Cam?
Well, it started out as we were in the middle of the pandemic and had nothing better to do with our lives than to spend 2 weeks making hard changes and figuring out like every hour of the day was how do we save this chameleon's life? And part of the decision to start a rescue was knowing that after the pandemic, other people are not going to have the luxury to just throw away every hour of 2 weeks. Um, And so it started as a conversation that was kind of potentially, hypothetically, somewhere 30 years down the line, we'll do this. And then we were purchasing an enclosure in the following January, so about 6 months after we adopted Spock. And we kind of had a lizard fall in our lap in that enclosure, who was not going to survive if she hadn't fallen into our lap. And so she was our first rescue, and we rehabilitated her, found her a new home, cleared up all of her parasites while she was with us. And that was kind of when we realized that, hey, we can actually start making a difference right now, and we don't have to wait 30 years to do it.
Cool. Well, I love that. I think that's it's a great attitude to have about things, and you can start from somewhere. It's always the beginning, right?
Mhm.
So that's pretty cool. So what kind of lizard was that that one you mentioned?
So that was a Cuban Anole. We named her Soul. And yeah, she was in an enclosure, and the woman that had sold us the enclosure did not tell us there was a lizard in there until after she had our money and she was walking away and said, "Oh, by the way, there might be a lizard in there, just so you're aware." And then when we followed up texting her later that night, she said that if we hadn't purchased that enclosure when we did, she was planning on tossing the Anole out into the snow, Iowa snow. And that was when we were like, we got to do something. We have to save her and find her somebody who will care about her.
Right. Wow. Yeah, it's scary, the disposable pet mentality that so many people have, because you can pick up a well, with you said it was a Cuban Anole, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was it a Cuban night Anole then, or
No.
just
Brown.
the brown Anole? Yeah. So those are like you can get for under $5 sometimes at the pet store. So they're thinking of that in the way of it's disposable, but that's just too sad.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad that there are those of us who don't feel that way.
Yeah.
We got a question from Kevin. He says, I help a few exotic rescues, and I see a ton of people surrendering animals because they didn't realize what they were in for. What can we do to ensure more people do enough research before purchase? Who would like to chime in on that?
So I can kind of take that. My focus in what we do is education, and so what I've tried to look at is what is important to a person walking through a pet store, because a lot of people will buy a cheap lizard because it's a cheap lizard and just look at that lizard is worth what I paid for it and nothing else, right? And that's why you have these bad scenarios. What we've started to do is, rather than have them have to come to us, we've started to do outreach, and we just started this not too long ago, so at the end of this summer. But because of my experience in education, I have been able to bring animals that all have something like a story behind them. For example, we have a crested gecko who has one eye that he's blind in,
Mm-hmm.
and he has a dropped tail. And so I used that story of his, the eye being blind, as a way to show these unique things about animals and show their true care while doing it in a fun way, because he's such a personable animal. The sad thing is that we have to use those animals almost as this is a cute animal, and that's why you should take care of it. Where the reality is, people have to want to change, and the way that you make them want to change is by showing them something that they care about. And in this case, it's animals that have went through scenarios that aren't great. So what we've started doing is have animal ambassadors that have come to us and have things about them that make them a good educational animal. For example, someone who's making noise over here that I keep looking at, we have a silkback bearded dragon that was sold from a pet store as a leatherback, and they have vastly different hair. But she serves as a great ambassador to show why it's not okay to just breed just to breed. Like, you should have a rhyme or reason beyond just putting two animals together just to get more animals. But each of our animals sort of has a different appeal to them that we can reach a different audience with. On our website, we do have stories of each of them if you're interested, of a lot of our animal ambassadors right now.
Awesome. Love it. I think education, including outreach, a proactive form of education, that's about as proactive as you can get with education. So I think that is a big part of the puzzle. The more people know something about these animals, the more people will care, right? And just so everybody knows, the website is scrolling down there at the bottom throughout the entire video. So it's going to be hard to forget and hard to miss as long as I remind you that it's there. And I wanted to thank All Exotics for the super chat, first one of the evening. Excellent. So All Exotics, we really appreciate that. There wasn't a message that I saw, but we just appreciate the support. All right. So I'm just going to check in on the chat for a second. Whoa. Okay. Well, here's an experience that Christine had, who has a chameleon that's also a rescue. Someone bought a veiled chameleon for a 5-year-old autistic son. The kid freaked out and the father threatened to throw it out. Wow. Yeah, that's one thing. I think a lot of times parents don't prepare their children very well and don't necessarily match a pet with a child that's going to, they don't necessarily think of what would be the best match for the child and for the animal.
That's something we've sort of started to look at too. And we have a very primitive form of this, but we have I'm sure on Facebook back in the day, there was these which character are you? Except for it's based on what you value in your life, right? If you have a lot of space or a little space, or if you have a warmer home versus a colder home, it'll match an animal to you that you might want to look into, rather than just getting an animal because it's cool, like a chameleon, and not thinking about what that means for care or what that means for a long-term commitment.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think the culture of reptile care and other pet care too has been gravitating that way for a while. It's still got a long way to go. But when I think of where it was, 20 years ago, or 30 years ago, we've made a lot of progress that way. But there are still many people who don't really think about that. I remember being, 13 or whatever and thinking it didn't matter what it was. I wanted it if it was an animal. And I didn't really, it wasn't that I didn't think about, let me see if I can fix my camera here. It wasn't that I didn't think about the welfare of the animal at all or didn't want to do any research or anything. It's just I didn't think about what the consequences would be of putting in all that effort and time, if you know what I mean. And so let's see. What am I doing? I don't know why my camera just blinked out. But I'm going to play with that for a second. But I wanted to ask you another question. Can you give us an idea of what types of animals, you've mentioned a couple already, a couple of reptiles, but what kinds of animals, what range of animals do you end up with in your rescue, and what kinds might you anticipate?
Okay, so we have a broad variety of animals. We primarily specialize in lizards just because there is a gap in the market here in Iowa where there is not somebody else that is working to take care of lizards in the same way that snakes have a rescue and birds have a rescue and tortoises have a rescue. So that's kind of the niche that we've fallen into. We have primarily taken in leopard geckos, crested geckos, bearded dragons. And then we've also had a hedgehog. We have a black and white tegu who came to us as a rescue and is now an ambassador. We have everything from anoles to blue-tongued skinks to a box turtle and just kind of all over the place.
Cool. That's interesting that there's a snake rescue already in your area. That's pretty cool that there are already some that are filling some niches, and you get to find where you fit. I think that's pretty cool. Oh, here's another. I like this comment from Frank the Tank. A $5 pet often does require hundreds of dollars for all the materials it needs, all the equipment and so on. Very good point. And that's why I never like it when I hear, overhear someone walking into a pet store and they're like, I want something cheap. It's for my kid, something like that. When whatever it is, if you're going to take care of it right, it's not going to be cheap.
Absolutely.
I guess a couple examples of that. I think it's kind of interesting that the ones that we most primarily get in are those crested geckos, leopard geckos, and bearded dragons, because they're not crazy expensive at the pet store. But then you also in this like some of the bigger pet stores nowadays, I've seen a tegu or something like that. Where I mean, if you think about the size difference from a baby bearded dragon to a full size bearded dragon, it's a surprise enough to a lot of people who buy that cheap pet. But a tegu is a whole nother ball game, and no one in the right mind, no one who's walking into a pet store looking for a pet is typically fit to take on a tegu, because when you walk into a pet store looking for a pet, typically you don't see a lot of the behind the scenes things that happen in pet stores, such as a lot of a certain animal being kept together, even if they don't like being kept in groups, and those sort of things. But it kind of goes back to that, people want what's convenient and not what's best for them or the animal.
Right. Convenience is so highly prized in our culture that sometimes we overuse it. Okay, sorry, I'm just adjusting my lighting again. It's being really goofy today. I don't know, having bad luck with my tech, but I think I've got it fixed. There, now I'm back. Okay, so one thing that Christine was mentioning about her chameleon. Yeah, the cost of a rescue is often not cheap. $1,000, including deworming. Yeah. So 503 had a question. Are Russian tortoises escape artists by nature?
I think that depends a lot on where they are. I've heard stories, and again, we're not super versed in the turtle and tortoise world. We have a friend who has all kinds, like she runs it's called the Big and Small Tortoise Rescue out of Ames, Iowa, and she has all kinds of fun stories about tortoises, like sulcatas just mowing down a fence, or Russians climbing over a fence to get with to get in the same enclosure as the sulcatas, or all kinds of crazy stories. I've heard stories of box turtles, and I don't know the science behind this, but they always want to move south, at least in Iowa. And the theory is that they want to head back to where they're native to, or where they were first from, or those sort of things. But I think all animals have potential to be escape artists, but and there's really no amount of preparation that will ever be perfect. There's always going to be mistakes made, and that's something that's been really hard for us to accept. Is no matter how much work you put into an animal, sometimes it's not enough, and sometimes a lot of rescues are too far on the rescue side of things. But I don't know enough about Russians in particular, but all animals have potential, is what I will say.
I think that's a good answer. Now, here's a comment about the special requirements most pet needs. The thing that gets me is people not thinking about needing a vet if they don't have one before purchasing a new pet, from All Exotics. Great point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Would you say what would be the percentage of animals, just roughly, that come into your rescue needing veterinary care because they've been, they haven't gotten it when they needed it before?
I would say that we've been fairly blessed in the animals that we have received as surrenders, because for the vast majority of them, owners are realizing that they don't have the capacity to continue meeting their needs before it gets to the point that they are at a veterinary emergency. And we can generally make a pretty good turnaround on our animals without needing to go to the vet. That said, we do have a really good partnership with a vet that's close by. And she is super supportive and has made things so much easier by not charging us the full price for her time, or sometimes she'll refill a silver sulfidizing cream without charging us for the refill, which is just amazing and makes it so much easier to be able to give the animals the care that they need.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. It's very cool.
I will say it has been difficult being in Iowa that there's not a whole lot of people that are specialized in exotics. For some, it's crazy that most people around here work with livestock for some reason. I don't know, but in such a agriculture-ridden state, we're really fortunate to have the partnership that we do and the relationship that we do.
No, definitely. Yeah. I know that I have had trouble finding a good exotic vet sometimes. It can be tricky. You find, when I've moved into a new place or something and say, okay, where's the exotic vet? And they're saying, no, we can't do it. No, we can't do it. Sorry, but maybe these people do. It sometimes takes a while to find. So unfortunately, I've found some good ones, but it can be hard. Let's see. There was a comment I was going to throw up here. Here's an interesting comment. The beetle guy mentioning that bugs often cost close to nothing to take care of. That's true that many of them have pretty simple requirements if you're going into a pet and you want to do a fairly low investment. Some of the invertebrates are in that category. That's true. Have you ever had any invertebrates come into your rescue?
Typically, invertebrates don't necessarily come in as a there's something wrong with this animal, help sort of situation, but more of like a I have nowhere to give these to. And talking about animals that are given up on, inverts are a whole nother, like, oh, it's a bug, they don't really care. We do have ambassador inverts, and just talking about animals that are easy to take care of. Madagascar giant cockroaches are the peak of animal care because, like, if you have lettuce that your Uromastyx didn't eat, or not lettuce, but collard greens or things like that your Uromastyx didn't eat, then the Madagascar hissing cockroaches, it's gone. But yeah, we do have a few inverts. I mentioned before the stream that your videos actually made me want to get into death baiting beetles. So we have those in the room with me right now. So we do have a few there.
Cool. Yeah, I've noticed that's something great about having a lot of the inverts that I have, the beetles and the isopods and so on. And since we have chickens too, that if there's any leftover food, one or more of those creatures can take care of it. There's very little waste. And it's just a fun way to be a little bit more green, I guess. Okay, Theropod Hunter had a question. You've mentioned several different lizards. So have you ever taken care of legless lizards? And if so, what are their unique care requirements?
I will add one part and then I'm going to throw it to Cameron. I've watched your name go through multiple times and I love dinosaurs. So thank you for coming, by the way. But the only legless lizard we have taxonomically is a snake, and that is Cameron's. So beyond that, no. No, we don't have a legless lizard. I don't know on the rest of the information off the top of my head. We would love to get one.
They are certainly on Cole's dream list to get a true legless lizard. But for now, we have a singular blood python, and that's our only non-quadruped.
Okay, cool.
Or not including inverts, I guess.
Yeah, I was gonna say they're technically not quadrupeds, but
Yeah. So this it's a blood python, you said.
Yes.
How's its personality?
She has her days. Most of the time, she's pretty good. Every once in a while, she will get kind of spicy with me. There have been days that I've lost count of how many times she's struck. But we just let her get it all out of her system because for the next several weeks after that, she's very, very sweet. She is still quite young and is about to go into her first shed right now. So she has been refusing food for the last couple weeks. And I've been talking with her breeder about it, and she's like, oh, the whole clutch is going into shed. So everybody's doing that right now.
Okay.
And we're just fingers crossed that it goes well.
Yeah, I hope so. I've been kind of intrigued by blood pythons. They have some really interesting characteristics. I love their shape, their coloration, and the fact that their metabolism is really pretty slow for even for a big snake. They're pretty slow. It's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Kevin's got a question here. Kevin says, I also see a few breeders and flippers locally who don't really do much as far as making sure potential customers have the correct information or experience. So not just pet stores, but sometimes breeders and flippers, probably especially flippers, I would imagine. What can be done to remedy that? Great question. Who would like to chime on that one?
I can start on it. It's a little tricky to necessarily convince individuals to change their ways and how they are doing their vetting process before going through with a purchase.
Mm-hmm.
Something that we do that we thought was going to be an absolute flop, but worked out very well for us at our first expo was we make these little, I have an example of one. They're a little bio, kind of like a dating profile for each lizard. And we throw in a little bit of humor, but the priority in these is to really showcase who each animal is on the individual level so that people can get to know their personalities and if they have any unique needs before they actually go through with the adoption. And that was aren't expecting to be successful at the expo because we have older lizards that we can't guarantee any genetics about them. We didn't have a lot of the things that a lot of people tend to look for, but they were a big hit at the expo. So that was an exciting discovery. And I think that if that is something that other breeders and flippers, ideally there's not flippers out there,
Right.
but if they were to take on something where they're emphasizing this is who the animal is and not just what it looks like, I think that could also help to ensure that owners are caring enough to make sure that they actually know what they're doing before they make the purchase.
Right. Very good point. And I really liked how on that card that you showed, it's got a mixture of information and humor, but the humor was also information. I love that because somebody looking at, I especially am referring to the part about the food. Where it said, no food, only victims. It does give the potential adopter the information that it's going to eat live food. They're probably at least starting to wrap their heads around that because you can get a crested gecko and people can keep crested geckos without ever giving them live food and they can be okay. It's not necessarily ideal, but it's possible, and that's not really possible with the leopard gecko. But it gives them that idea. Okay, I'm probably going to have to feed this insects. So I like it, even though it's funny. It's still information.
And I think the beauty of it is every animal, a lot of people get a crested gecko or a leopard gecko or any animal that they've had before or that they know a friend who has it and expect it to be exactly the same. Every animal beyond, like, I guess I haven't worked with inverts enough to know if they have personalities, but a lot of the reptiles that we think of as like a reptilian brain and just be very basic have completely different personalities, and we try to emphasize that. And it's really nice to see that at expos and those sort of things, we try things that are completely different than what other, like people who are just selling to sell. We want people to know the animals have a personality. They're more than just a leopard gecko. It's more than something for your kid to play with for a week and then never touch again. Like there's a whole being in there, and it's important to know those things. So we try to make it fun and educational, and we think it's been working. So
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I can vouch for at least some invertebrates having personalities. Specifically, some of the ones that I've kept that seem to have personalities would include, I'm not necessarily limiting myself to this, but I would say jumping spiders. Loaded with personality and can be totally different, one to another. Same species, same sex and everything, and just totally different in behavior and the way they interact with people. So, can definitely happen.
I did want to mention this is specifically for Therabod Hunter again. I thought of this right after I talked last time. He said his favorite, or he had an Albertosaurus. When we first got Spock, I was a huge fan of Jurassic Park. And after we built the enclosure, which is like sitting right here, we made him this Jurassic Park.
Here, let me put that in the solo view. That's awesome.
I just happened to have it right here, and I thought of it right afterwards. But yeah,
Oh, that's
huge fan.
fantastic. Love it. My son would love that too. He's a huge dinosaur fan as well.
See, the weird thing is, when I was little, I was terrified of Jurassic Park movies, but now it's like my favorite series. So I could talk all day about dinosaurs, but that's not what I'm here for. So
Oh yeah, that's cool. I like it. The it's funny to hear you talk about Jurassic Park when you were little, because I was an adult when it came out. So
yeah, that's fair. I guess, and you mentioned earlier, like 30 years ago, and I was thinking like I wasn't even alive. Like that's
yeah,
why.
yeah. And I started in pet keeping in, let's see, it would have been 1978. I was 4 at the time, but I remember getting my first goldfish, ill-fated goldfish, I might add, at 4 years old. So back in the 70s, when pet stores were even crazier than they are now, and mostly not good ways.
Yeah.
But, well, I wanted to ask you if you had any specific success stories you wanted to mention from your rescue, and maybe tell us a little bit about what people can learn from those success stories.
I'm trying to think off the top of my head. A lot of our really big success stories did have like rehomes. I'm trying to think of ambassadors right now that we can talk about more in depth. I'm trying to look around the room right now. I guess Octavia is a good example, or Tegu. Um, when she was rehomed to us, she was covered in scars, and I can actually go get her if you guys are interested. But she was covered in scars, and that was because as a baby female Tegu, she was kept with an adult male Tegu, and I don't know how she made it through that scenario, but she had all kinds of bite marks and things, and so we homed her, and every single shed she looks more and more beautiful. Like, and it's really cool to be able to see the progress. And it's like when you see something day to day, you barely realize it, but when you see the start to finish, it's really really cool to see how far she's come with us.
Wow, that's fantastic. We would like to meet Octavia. That'd be cool. And I just, when you said they had her in with an adult male, I was just, what,
Yeah.
what are these people thinking? I mean, obviously they weren't.
I don't know how old she was when she was with the male. If it was like right off the, like, I don't know the scenario. That's just what I was told, and it wasn't by the person who rehomed her to us. He was just trying to help out someone else, and so on and so forth, as the story goes with a lot of these animals. But she's been one of our best ambassadors, and because of that experience, she's very timid, and I always worry about any big reptile with um, like kids, for example. Like that terrifies me. As a teacher, even though I teach high school, like I still worry about that. One thing in particular is we have after watching some of Clint's videos, we started target training Octavia, and rather than orange like his is, ours is like a bright green color. And I always worry about what the kids are wearing when we go into shows, because I'm like, I don't think she'll think they're food because it's such a big target, but I don't want to risk that, right? So I've never been in a scenario where that's happened, or I've worried about that. Fortunately enough, apparently bright green is not a popular color. I don't have a lot of road workers at our shows, but I don't know. It's always in the back of my mind.
That's a good point to think about. I do love target training. Fantastic stuff.
I can go get Octavia out if you want to keep talking with Cam. That's
Yeah,
cool. I'll grab her.
yeah, that'd be great. One question I wanted to ask too is, if you had one pro and one con of running a reptile rescue, or well, exotic animal rescue with a focus on reptiles, what would it be?
Oh boy. Um, there's so many answers to both sides of that. But I think my choice for a con, we'll start on the negative end, would be understanding our um, like our knowledge about the animals that we're working with isn't always on par with what other people know about the same animals. And so if they're very excited about, oh, you have a leopard gecko, I have a leopard gecko, and this is what I keep my leopard gecko in, and this is what I feed my leopard gecko, and we'll sit there going, oh no, oh no, how do I kindly steer you in a better direction without like shutting you down, because it's awesome that you're excited about it and clearly you care, but we want to get them to the best possible stance. Octavia's back. Hi. um, and as far as a pro, I think I would have to say that would be anytime somebody hears about what we do and they come running to us to say, oh my gosh, this is the animal that I have. And just finding out that in a livestock state, there are so many people who are passionate about reptiles. It's a really beautiful thing. And it's a much larger community than what I had ever anticipated it would be.
That's a great thing. Yeah, it's great when you are able to find people, when we find our people, other people who care about reptiles and things like that. That's awesome. Well, Cole, do you want to introduce us to Octavia now?
Yeah. So this is Octavia. Like I said, she's super super calm. Something that well, she started off being sort of a little timid with us and wanting to get away. Now she just wants all four of her feet to be on the ground, which is why she keeps moving wrong direction. But she's still got some growing left to do. And I don't know if any of her situation in the past will have stunted her by any means, but she's going to be moving on me. But she's been super, super cool to teach animals or teach about with a lot of people. And I see the question that just came up. I think it's part of the room that she's in, but the other aspect, a lot of younger tegus will have like a green head. So she might still be growing out of that a little bit. Because when they're young, they can't defend themselves as well, and they want to blend into the grass and those sort of things. So she might still have a little bit of green left in her, but I don't know genetics or anything with her because of her skin
Background. She is a beauty for sure.
Yeah.
So theropod hunter wants to know how big they generally grow.
Females will get a little bit smaller, but males can get a little bigger than 4 foot. I've heard cases of people saying up to 5 foot. I've never seen a lot of tegus in person. Octavia was one of. She was kind of a weird scenario because we've watched tegus in videos all the time, and we were sort of approached with this, like, and she is a dream animal of mine. Like I've always wanted a tegu, but you never. I don't know. It's sort of like an imposter syndrome that you always worry about if you're ready for it. She's about 3.5 foot right now. That said, most of it is tail, as with a lot of lizards are. We are going to guess that she's going to max out about 4 foot. We'll have to see how things go, I guess. But 4 foot's about what people say.
Okay. Yeah, and she is gorgeous. Destruction Warehouse was mentioning her pattern, and it really is the contrast in the distribution of the pattern is it's amazing.
Yeah,
Really,
you always see like the really like pretty tegus online and those sort of things. And as much as cool as it is, I would never. I don't know. It's so much more valuable to me to take in an animal that needs a home rather than one that you're just buying for a price. And that said, to each their own. But to me, I'm a big fan of stories and sort of following the journey of an animal. Um, but I don't know. I want to trade Octavia for the world. There are some beautiful Peggies out there, but she's the one for us.
yeah. Well, and she also happens to be beautiful, so you get the best of both worlds.
Exactly. She's about to go back down for brumation here in a couple weeks. But she, I don't know. She's still a truckin'.
Yeah.
Um, I'll go ahead and put her back just so she's not squirming this whole time.
Okay. Do you have any other animals, Cam, that are going to go down for brumation soon?
Um, I think Octavia should be our only one this year that will be going down for brumation. When we initially had her surrendered, it was in the middle of her brumation.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of an interesting thing to figure out, like
Yeah.
what kind of pattern to work with her and when to let her have her sleep. And then she woke up and just had this fire inside of her. She was ready to go. So this is, I think she's our only one that goes down for brumation, isn't she?
Yeah, I mean, we could brumate, like some bearded dragons will brumate. We do have a blue tongue skink, but it's an Indonesian, so we don't brumate her or him. Excuse me. When we first had him, we thought he was a her, and Cameron's gonna make a joke about how we've had him for long enough that I should get the pronouns right, but I still mess it up to this day. But she's the big one for brumation.
The other one I might foresee going down for brumation would be Tilly, our
Oh yeah.
fox turtle.
Oh,
But she still has so much energy in her. I don't know if it's actually going to happen this winter.
yeah. It's interesting too. I've noticed that with my reptiles too. Sometimes it's not very big change in the environment can decide or make them decide whether or not they want to brumate. And I try to respect their preferences. Like I noticed when we got a new furnace a couple of years ago, and it changed our winter temperature because it was a lot cheaper to run than the other one in our house by like 2 degrees, only 2 degrees. But it was enough. So our leopard gecko decided, nope, not brumating. I'm good. I don't need to. And before that, she would always brumate, and it was fine. She, it wasn't a problem at all to have her brumate. She was comfortable with it. Now she doesn't. She just doesn't want to. And but my red-sided garter snakes are all about it. They want to brumate early. Like they'll start brumating in August if I let them. So I'm not sure what that's about. I guess they're from a Montana locality, so maybe it starts getting cold pretty early where they're from. But it's interesting to watch. I think brumation is a fascinating process to be a part of and be connected to it. It's interesting to have creatures that have these cycles, and we need to try to respect those and try to help mimic nature to some degree. It's pretty interesting. So, do you have any other critters you'd like us to meet? No pressure.
You want to bring out Suki and talk a little bit about him?
I certainly can. So I only have one animal with me right now because I am living in a college apartment. But Suki, the blue tongue skink, stays with me because he helps me out with business pitches when I'm competing.
But well, I guess while she's doing that, I'll talk a little bit about what she does. So because of Cameron's experience with college degrees, she actually makes a custom feed formulation for exotic pets. And while we're planning on expanding into more, right now our main focus is blue tongue skinks.
Mhm.
and Tilly is sort of our test subject.
Awesome.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
So, oh, hold on. I'm doing it backwards here. There we go.
You're
Okay.
good. This is Suki. He's currently in shed here. I can try to adjust that light a little bit. There we go.
Ah, there we go. Yeah. You can see the
So
pattern.
he's currently shedding, but he's a Halmahera blue-tongued skink. You can see that beautiful belly there.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, he's our main product tester for NutriCubes, which is my line of lizard food. And our next recipe in the works is going to be for a tegu. So
Cool.
I'll give that little spoiler, I guess.
Cool. So you mentioned the NutriCubes. Is that intended to be a sole diet, or is it intended to be a staple with supplementation of other things, or could it be either one?
So NutriCubes is formulated specifically to meet the needs of an individual species because I've found that that's not really a thing that's available for owners right now to choose. And like a blue tongue skink and a tegu have such vastly different nutritional requirements that I don't believe that it's possible to be giving either of them something nutritious if the food is made for both of them.
Right.
So NutriCubes are a complete diet that can be fed on their own with no extra supplementation. However, I suggest adding supplementation just for mental enrichment.
Mm-hmm. That
So,
makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
mhm.
Cool. So how long have you been using that diet?
Suki has been on that diet for 2 years and a little over a month now. And he gets a extra supplement every once in a while. At Thanksgiving, he always gets a turkey heart, which he loves. But we just started doing sales actually 10 days ago. So
Oh, wow.
we sell at expos in Iowa right now.
Mhm. Do you ever plan on expanding that to online sales?
I would love to. I have to figure out shipping before I can get to that point.
Mm-hmm. And I guess you'd have to ship it on like dry ice or something, huh?
Yeah.
Stays frozen, yeah. Like a rodent order or Reptilinks or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So while we're looking at Suki, when you said you used Suki in pitches, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I am fairly heavily involved in the entrepreneurship program here at Iowa State. They call me their poster child. So I compete in business pitches where I talk to the general public at my university about what Spock Sanctuary is and what we do and why it's important to take care of reptiles the way that they need to be taken care of. And anytime I'm allowed to have a visual aid, Suki comes along and um, he serves as the star of the show, and I'm just the background vocals.
That's cool. I like it. So, when you use blue tongue skinks to do outreach and so on, what do you kind of tell people about the pros and cons of keeping a blue tongue?
I would say that cons would be that they have a larger space than some of the more common options, like a crested gecko or a leopard gecko. And also because they are an omnivore and they can choose to eat from a wide variety of foods, that contributes to them being more picky a lot of the time and deciding that they don't want to eat the things that are necessary for them. So this little guy here, if given the opportunity, will pick out sweet potatoes and blueberries and scrambled eggs and any insects, and he will not touch his greens or his squash or anything else that's necessary for his diet. And that's one of the benefits of NutriCubes is that it's all blended together so that he can't pick it apart.
Mhm.
Pros to having a blue tongue skink is they have a wonderful ability to be handled because of their size compared to like a crested gecko, or on the other end, something larger. Tegus can be a little more difficult to handle, and blueies are a beautiful size where they're awesome for handling. And if you work with them from a younger age, they tend to be very good at socializing. That is a generalization. Every animal is going to have a different personality, and some of them will not like handling, but
Right.
they tend to have a good personality from what we've seen. And they're just really exciting to work with. People get really excited to see their tongues, especially. I love in between pitches, I'll be holding him, and somebody's like, "Oh my gosh, why is he called a blue tongue skink?" And I say, "Watch him here," and I'll tickle his chin, and usually he'll stick his right there. And they get so excited to see that it is actually blue.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I think that they do kind of fill that sweet spot for a lizard size for handling. They're not big enough like a monitor or tegu that if you handle them and they get a little bit rambunctious, you can need medical treatment afterwards.
I know.
And not so small that if a kid tries to handle them, that the lizard needs medical treatment afterwards. It's a pretty good spot to be in. I love that. Very cool. This has been fun. We have a few more minutes left, and I want to make sure that if anybody has questions they would like to address or like to bring up so that they can be addressed, this is a great time to do it. I have one question from a patron that I want to see what your take is on as well, if you don't mind. Certain animals reproduce very quickly and reproduce kind of inevitably. One of those that's kind of famous among reptiles is mourning geckos. And I have a colony of mourning geckos that I've had for about a decade. But Emmeline on Patreon posted a question about basically took a quote from Reddit and gave me the link. And the idea is, how many geckos are too many geckos? I have about 50 in my vivarium. It was like a 3 foot high by a foot and a half by, something like this. Vivarium, they had about 50 of them. And that person had been told, oh, they'll stop reproducing when they feel like they're too crowded. So what would you say if someone comes into your rescue and says, I have mourning geckos and I have too many, what should I do? What would be some suggestions you might have for them?
Mourning geckos are such an interesting scenario. We have a couple of our own. We have a little colony. They're still young, so they're about to. I would guess that they're going to start breeding this spring, if I were to guess. But I don't think there's like a great answer besides find a lot of friends who are lonely. Because I think one of Clint's videos is the gift that keeps on giving, and it's literally exactly that. I guess I don't know. That's a good question. I'm glad that we haven't been in that scenario. Find friends or enemies, and then just fill their house. No, I'm just kidding. No. I don't know. That's a good question. Do you have any thoughts, Cam?
I feel like at some point mourning geckos are going to be kind of like snails. Once you have a starter, it'll explode. And when it gets to a certain point where it's too many, eventually you have to start culling some of those eggs to keep the colony that is there healthy. And sometimes that's something that we as keepers have to decide if that's the right course of action for the overall well-being of the colony. We, in particular, have little tubes that are like that big, and they're capped on one end. And they are set up in various locations in the morning gecko enclosure so that hopefully when they start breeding, they will, fingers crossed, choose to lay their eggs in there. And later down the line, if we get to a point where we do have to start considering culling, then that would make it a little easier for us to manage as far as locating where the eggs are so that we can handle them.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
And-
think a lot of the suggestions in the comments are good ones too. I mean, there are some snakes that eat almost primarily lizards. Vine snakes are a great example. So if you're in a scenario like that, I guess you have your own solution there. But I don't know. It's weird as a rescue to like also be cognizant of the fact that some if you want reptiles to live good lives, some reptiles you have to sort of look at as feeders, and morning geckos are one of the like the best case scenarios because they're going to keep producing, and so if you want your morning geckos to not fight over things, then yeah. But yeah, I don't know. It's a good question though.
It is. It is a good question, and I think some great points have been brought up. And having, I don't really have to worry about culling mine because there's pretty much a ready market for them. I bring them to expos, I sell them online, and what things like that. So I don't really have to worry about that so much. But one post I saw a long time ago when I was researching morning geckos to get started out with, someone said, I have a tank with green snakes in it. And green snakes are, they tend to eat a lot of insects, but they'll also eat small lizards and stuff. And they said, I keep mine with the green snakes in a big old bioactive vivarium. The snakes will eat the young morning geckos. They will not touch the adults. And I haven't tried that, but it worked for them. And presumably if they wanted to reproduce them, they could, have the floral tubes or whatever in there and take the eggs out and incubate them separately if they wanted to. But I have never come up with anything that would stop my geckos from laying. I have noticed that if they lay them in a stupid place, which they will inevitably do to some degree, they do use the tubes, but it's like sort of it's random whether they decide to use the tubes or not. Once there are eggs in the tube, then the other ones tend to be encouraged to lay there. But if there aren't any eggs in the tube yet, it's sort of random whether they do it there. And sometimes they'll do it right on the door, and you open the door and you hear this, this tiny little crack. And because it's not where you'd see it until you open the door, and there it is. Things like that, or in other weird places sometimes. Usually it's in some sort of crevice or, place that makes sense, but sometimes it's in weird places. And when the eggs get cracked, they will eat them. They will eat them, reclaim all the protein and calcium and everything. So that's something to bear in mind too. If you did have to cull the eggs, you wouldn't have to waste them necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
Simply cracking the egg would just stimulate them to just eat them. And they will eat every bit that they can remove from whatever surface they're on to get as much calcium as possible. They might just leave a little tiny bit of calcium where they're not able to scratch it off with their teeth. But once the eggs hatch, they'll eat the eggshells too, and you can hear them do it. I have one of the morning gecko vivariums, two of them actually, are right near my bed, and I'll hear that at night sometimes. They'll be like eating the eggshells and hear them crunching the eggshells. So that is something to think about as well.
That is cool. As far as the comment about laying in stupid places, we had a leopard gecko, and she had a little bit of pea gravel in her enclosure, and we gave her a dig box, but on one particular occasion, she decided to hide her eggs in the pea gravel instead of in the dig box.
Oh,
so
no.
we had to take out all of her pea gravel when we found the eggs.
Slowly, you didn't have.
It wasn't like pea gravel. It was like a little bit larger, so it was almost the perfect size to look like a leopard gecko egg. So it sort of just blended in, and it really like felt them and everything. And that's not something I routinely do. Is just feel rocks. But so like I don't know. It was kind of an interesting scenario. They were in fertile and everything. So once they started yellowing, we were like, oh. But yeah, and I saw a comment about a mourning gecko that escaped laying an egg on someone's shoe. That's a new one.
That's awesome. Oh, well, I looked at the clock and it is about 6:30. So it's about time to wrap up. But before we do, is there anything else you would like to mention? Anything you want our viewers to hear?
I guess a lot of people in here sort of share the same views as we do upon reptiles being more than a $5 pet. So beyond that, care about the world around you. Check out. We have a TikTok, and we're about to start a YouTube actually this weekend. So if you're interested, I'm not the greatest at video editing, but it'll be cool to see sort of the journey if you're interested. But beyond everything else, keep doing what you do. Keep supporting channels like Russ's, and we're glad to have been here.
Awesome. What about you, Cam? Anything else?
Couldn't have said it better myself.
All right. Well, I want to thank you both for coming. It's been great to talk to you, get to know you a little bit, and to just have you share your passion and your knowledge and your fascination and your desire to help others develop all of those things as well. I think that's great. And as I mentioned it earlier in the stream, the website spocksanctuary.org is down here in the banner, and that'll be on the recording of this. It'll be there the whole time, so hard to miss. It'll be easy to find Spock Sanctuary and check out their YouTube channel that's coming out soon, and their other socials and so on. So thank you so much. And thank you everybody for contributing to the stream.
Thank you so much for having us. This has been a wonderful time.
Excellent. I enjoyed it too. Thank you so much.